Earlier this morning, I sent Attorney General Jeff Sessions a certified letter demanding that he open a criminal investigation into the NRA and the source of the unprecedented $30 million they spent to elect Donald Trump. You know, I spent nearly 3 decades as a federal prosecutor, 10 of them as chief and principal deputy chief of the criminal division's fraud section. I investigated, prosecuted, and convicted the most corrupt individuals and companies and organizations in the United States. I know when something doesn't smell right, and this conduct smells rotten. I'm going to present to you a case, a cast of characters, that's compromised by NRA leaders and Russian officials. I have a timeline of relationships and interactions here and in Moscow. And I'm going to draw for you a picture that demonstrates that it all leads to the tens of millions of dollars in dark money that the NRA and their entities spent to make sure that Donald Trump was elected President of the United States of America. Now, the first thing I'm going to show you is a chart which has a cast of characters and the players. These documents that I'm showing you are also on my website, which is at www.paulforvirginia.com/Russia investigation. And I'm going to just walk you through these characters now so we can understand their role in this corrupt organization. The first players I'm going to talk to you about are the NRA players. We have David Keene, who's the former president of the NRA. We have Wayne LaPierre, who's the CEO and public face of the NRA. We have Joe Gregory, and he's a chair of the Golden Ring of Freedom $1 Million Donor Club of the NRA. We have Pete Brownell, who was a long time, he's an NRA president, and he's the first president of the NRA in decades to decline to serve a second term here in May of 2018. And then we have Paul Erickson, a longtime NRA insider and political consultant on numerous presidential campaigns. Now we're going to go over to the Russian side. On the Russian side, we have the main player we have is Alexander Torshin. He's a deputy governor of the Central Bank of Russia. He's a mobster, and he's a money launderer. And he's also affiliated with the Russian spy service, the FSB. And he's eventually was a U.S. sanctioned, he was placed on the U.S. sanctioned blacklist. We also have his associate. Her name is Maria Butina. She was his assistant on the Central Bank of Russia staff. And then finally, the other Russian player we have, which is going to play a role in this, in these meetings, is the defense minister of Russia called Dmitry Rogozin. He's also been a subject of U.S. sanctions. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through the timeline, because I think the timeline that I put together shows you that all of the many illicit transactions between the NRA executives and Russian government officials. And also, I want to show you how it appears that one event leads to another event, leads to an action, and ends up with the NRA spending $30 million to elect Trump. More than 3 times the amount that they have ever spent on a presidential election. Now, I'm not going to go through each and every event on this timeline, and you have it on my website. You can look at it yourself. But let me point to some of the highlights in the timeline. The first thing I want to show you is that the Russians attend numerous events as VIP guests of NRA officials. And they go to not only the NRA events, but they go to events that are reserved for $1 million donors of the NRA. They do this year after year. And then after that, we have the Russians inviting these NRA leaders to to Russia and to Moscow to attend events and meet with Russian criminals once they get over there. NRA officials are meeting in Russia with blacklisted Russian officials and criminals. And then we see Butina coming back to the United States and meeting with Trump and asking President Trump questions about whether he supports sanctions against Russia. Here's a 25-year-old person who is coming to the NRA and asking Trump about questions about this. It doesn't make sense. And then we have Paul Erickson attempting to establish a back channel between the Kremlin and Trump via torsion. Now, torsion also is attending a private dinner, as you'll see in the timeline, a private dinner with Donald Trump Jr. Right before, the day before, the NRA, for the first time in their history, endorsing a candidate for president before they actually become the party's nominee. And then torsion, the Russian spy, who's also a mobster, who's also a money launderer, then goes back to Russia, and upon his return to Russia is given a commendation medal by the Russian spy service, the FSB. When you put all of this together, it demands answers. And you got to ask yourself, why? Does it make sense that these Russian officials would be meeting the NRA really because they want to promote gun ownership in Russia? It doesn't make sense. And the reason it doesn't make sense is because Putin is against this. But why is the Russian government allowing this to happen? And so what I've created in that vein is what I call the circle of characters, where we look and walk through exactly what goes on and what went on that leads us to believe that we have to continue to investigate and should investigate through a criminal investigation why this went on and why it ended up supporting the payment of $30 million to elect President Trump. And I would say to you, there's no one in their right mind who thinks the Russian government wants to arm their citizens. So why? Why the interest in the most organized and largest gun rights organization in the world? Right here in the United States. Why the interest by Russia? And it doesn't pass the smell test. And I'm not the only one asking these questions. The Senate is investigating these allegations as well. And the FEC is investigating where the NRA money came from. And I spent decades investigating cases with less evidence than this. There are more than enough facts surrounding the NRA officials and Putin confidants to meet the criteria for opening a DOJ criminal investigation. And I'm demanding, and I did so in my letter today to the Attorney General, that they immediately open a DOJ criminal investigation into this activity. And it's because the DOJ is the only component that has the power to actually issue grand jury subpoenas, to actually call people as witnesses, and to bring people before the grand jury to answer questions. And finally, they can demand that evidence be provided from international transactions through treaty requests. Only the DOJ can do that. The American people deserve to know whether the NRA tampered with our democracy by allowing secretly structured Russian money to support a presidential campaign. I'm on a mission to get to the bottom of this. And this is one reason as well that I'm running for Congress. You know, my opponents in the Democratic primary will say that they can't wait to get an F from the NRA. But I won't be happy with just a bad grade. I believe that this evidence shows that the NRA is corrupt and needs to be criminally investigated now. The source of the tens of millions of dollars in dark money that have been spent to elect this president must be exposed. And if the evidence shows wrongdoing, then the NRA must be taken on and taken down. When I'm in Congress, I won't stop until they're held accountable, because that's my job and that's what I'll do. Thank you.